So earlier today, I was watching the second episode of Starfleet Academy. It was towards the end of the episode. They were doing their final negotiations for Beta Z to get back into the Federation. And my wife goes walking by my office door and she says, "What are you watching, some Disney shit? Let's talk about Starfleet Academy." What's up, everybody? My name is Steve. Welcome to the channel. If you're here from my wrestling content, you know where everything is. If you're new here, the bathroom's down the hall and to the left. Today, we're going to talk about Starfleet Academy. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I used to have a Star Trek podcast about 5 or 6 years ago. It petered out because life just sort of got in the way. In any event, I've been watching Star Trek since Next Generation back in the early 90s. And so I've always kept up with it. It's probably the one subject, maybe that isn't wrestling, that I know the most about. If I walk into any given room, there's a good chance that I'll know more about Star Trek than anybody else in that room. What that says about me, I don't know exactly. In any event, Star Trek pilots generally have kind of a hit or miss quality to them. The Next Generation pilot, obviously, it's kind of goofy looking back on it.
Data core medics.
He's frozen.
And in no way did it resemble what the show ultimately would become like 2 years later.
Mr. Worf. Fire.
DS9 and Voyager had pretty decent pilots, largely because the groundwork for the world building had already been done. In Next Generation, they were basically spin-offs. Fast forward years and years later, you get the Discovery pilot, which was polarizing, I guess. Strange New Worlds had a good pilot, but again, they had kind of a backdoor pilot season in Discovery Season 2, so the groundwork had already been laid there. And that brings us here to Starfleet Academy, a spin-off of Discovery, which is set like, I don't know, 1,000 years in the future or something like that. I think it's 800 years from like the Kirk era, something like that. In any event, kind of like the Discovery pilot, this one is a bit on the hit or miss side. I'm not 1,000% sure if I'm going to stick with it after those first 2 episodes, but maybe during the course of this review, I'll figure out whether or not I'm going to give it another shot or not. Before I get started, some context. I feel like because there's been so many different iterations of Star Trek over the last 60 years, one of the questions you got to ask yourself these days is, what am I trying to get out of my Trek? What kind of Star Trek do I like? And I think that's kind of important when watching one of these reviews. I'll give you an example. I am not a fan of Star Trek Enterprise. I've tried so many different times to get into that show, and I simply find it boring. You might love it. You might be like, man, Star Trek Enterprise is what I want from my Star Trek. Therefore, I'm probably not going to vibe with what this guy has to say. That's totally fine. I know what I like. Enterprise wasn't that. I also want to point out some things that, generally speaking, I don't have a problem with when it comes to Star Trek. These are common complaints that I've seen online that I'm like, yeah, I don't really feel that one. First up, the production release thing. I know in the streaming era, we're still getting used to the whole idea that they give us 10 to 12 movie quality episodes of a show, and then like, for 36 months, we get absolutely nothing, or for 2 years, or maybe if we're lucky a year, we'll get absolutely nothing, and then it picks back up. A lot of people out there want to return to the days where it's sort of like cheaper looking and they produce them faster, so we get like 23 to 24 episodes a year. I've pretty much just resigned myself to the fact that that's never coming back. I don't necessarily mind that we get 10 to 12 episodes of a show and then we got to sit back for a year or two to get the next season, largely because there is so much good content out these days. Between what we got on our phones, what we got on YouTube, what we got on the streamers, there's always something really good to watch, and it builds up the appetite for when we get the next 10 to 12 episode season of whatever thing that I want to watch. So I'm okay with that, although I totally understand why people want a return to the 22 episodes a season thing. I get it, especially with a show like Starfleet Academy, where not only do we have a main cast of cadets, but we've got a whole ass bridge crew that they introduced that will probably get no time for development whatsoever. Sorry about that, Becky Lynch. I don't see you having a lot of lines, but that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. The other thing is the elephant in every room these days, the whole diversity thing. When people freak out over the fact, oh my God, we got a woman captain and a woman first officer and a woman this and a black this and a gay this. It's Star Trek. It's kind of the whole thing about Star Trek. For God's sake, it gave us these people. It's not going away. That's the entire thing about Star Trek. It had the first interracial kiss, like on television ever. Kind of related to this also, overt political metaphors. Again, it's Star Trek. It gave us these people. It also gave us like the Cardassians and the Bajorans. We all knew what that was. Didn't bother us then. They get really thick with the political metaphors in Starfleet Academy to the point where I'm like, wait, why is she talking about democracy? That's still a thing 1,000 years from now? Good luck with that. Also, when I've seen this as kind of a nitpicky thing on social media, like Holly Hunter's wearing glasses and people are like, whoa, wait a second. Why would there be glasses in the future? Wouldn't they be able to correct that in the future? And I'm thinking like one of the most iconic scenes in what is largely hailed as the best Star Trek movie deals with eyeglasses.
Charming.
Or the idea that there's like an overweight person in the future. I feel like medicine will have advanced enough 1,000 years from now. So if I choose to be overweight, guess what? I could be overweight and still lead a really long life. Picard decided to be bald. I'm sure that there was plenty of cures for baldness in the 23rd century, 24th century, where the fuck it was back in Next Generation. I'm sure he didn't have to be bald, but he chose to be bald and he was fine being bald. Some people he's got a great bald head too. If I was in the 20 whatever century, I would totally do the turkey thing and get like a shit ton of hair, but not there yet. So let's talk about the positives in Starfleet Academy. Number one, by and large, it's cast pretty well. You can't argue with Holly Hunter or Paul Giamatti, who, I'm sorry, but to this day, even though this guy has had literally hundreds of amazing roles and he's probably won all sorts of awards, I still, whenever I see him, I think of Pig Vomit from the Howard Stern movie. I don't know why. So like when he shows up on my screen, my head immediately just goes, oh, it's Pig Vomit. He's great. Holly Hunter's great. They do a weird thing, I think, with some of the people's faces, though. I noticed this. Like, obviously, Holly Hunter is a little advanced in her age. And I've noticed a couple times on close-ups, there's like weird blurry spots on her face that I think they're doing in CG. I don't know why. I notice it. I'm sitting like 5 feet away from a giant television, so it's hard not to notice. But I don't know why they feel the need to do that. Wait, where was I? Oh, the cast. Yeah, the cast is great. They actually did a good job casting. So many shows these days cast people who are simply pretty and don't have a lot more to offer. I like that most of the cast, by and large, they've got character. They chose actors who actually are different looking and look kind of more interesting than your average show on like the CW, where it's a bunch of people who look like AI influencers. So I think this was cast pretty well. The cast does a pretty damn good job with what they're given, even if what they're being given isn't always the strongest thing in the world. Another thing I like is the setting. I kind of like that they're doing this post-discovery, post-burn, whatever, where the Federation is picking the pieces back up, simply because there's so much we don't know about what happened to other aliens, other planets, other races. And I think that's really fertile ground for them to kind of clean slate the entire thing. I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that. Like for example, the fact that we have a half Klingon, half Jem'Hadar. Like what the fuck is that all about? That's really cool. How did that come to pass? They're compatible? That's crazy. So I like the setting. Obviously, being an old guy, I probably would, yes, prefer the post-Picard season 3 setting, that Enterprise where 7 of 9 is the captain and all that shit. I kind of hate the idea that they tease that alone could be its own show, because I don't think it's ever going to happen, because they would have to pay way too many writers and producers that worked on the old shit because of the way contracts were done back then. That being said, I'm fine with this because it is kind of a clean slate and we get to revisit so many different, like the Beta Zeds. Like, oh wow, Beta Zeds are a big deal. That's cool. We're going to try to bring them to the table. That's neat. I like that. I like that we're sort of revisiting that kind of stuff. Another thing that I like is the technology of the time. The whole programmable matter thing that they introduced in Discovery is on full display here in the 32nd century, I think it is. 33rd century, whatever it is. I like it. I think it's cool. I think the idea that we have like 3D printers these days in 2026, it kind of makes sense that 1,000 years from now, they would have a large scale, very advanced version of that very simple idea. I like that. I think it's pretty cool. I still think they got a problem with the fact that like whenever they're in a bind, they have to mention, Discovery's got an issue. It can't come save us because Discovery can go wherever it wants to go. I still kind of wonder if the spore drive was ever really a good idea to mess with in the first place, because now that they have it, why do they just not use it all the time? Another thing that landed with me is a lot of the actual just writing. Some of it is very sharp. Some of it is very smart. Some of the humor landed really well, I think. And the basic plot, I'm really into. The dude who doesn't have his mom, and then Holly Hunter's character, who is responsible for separating them back when Starfleet was, or Federation was kind of shitty, and she's got guilt about that, and she quit over all that stuff. I like that. I think it's good. I think it's solid. I hope it's not another 3 years before the dude finds his mom. But I like that. As a basic plot device, I think it's a pretty strong one. Some of the humor really landed with me. Some of the humor really did not. So let's dive into the negatives of Starfleet Academy, because I feel like they are kind of a lot. All right, next up, let's talk about the negatives, because the negatives are kind of like a big deal here. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. There is a thing in modern Trek, and that's that general tone of like saccharine is the word that I use to describe it, where everything has to be boiled down to like an after school special moment, like an inspirational speech where people act like every single goddamn word is something to cry about. That was all over Discovery, and it took a lot away from the show. Even though I personally was a big fan of the first 2 seasons of Discovery, I really enjoyed the 3rd season. And there were moments in Discovery, especially towards the end of season 2, where there were emotional character beats that were really, really effective, but they were kind of made less than because they would try to force those heavy emotional, inspirational moments into like every single episode. Like every episode had to be wrapped up with the same kind of inspirational speech. And eventually it was just like, oh, here they go again. It's one of these things. Starfleet Academy kind of has that same tone to it. There was the initial speech that Holly Hunter gave the cadets, and everybody's sitting there in awe of this speech. And it's like, okay, do something first before you do this whole motivational speech deal. So that stuff can be a bit much. And I've noticed that throughout modern Trek, except Picard. Picard didn't really do that. I think it's because it was run by different people. Another aspect of modern Trek, and again, with specifically Starfleet Academy, that I kind of take issue with, that at least takes me out of it a little bit, is simply the production aspect of things. Obviously, back in the day when they were producing 22 to 24 episodes per season, 1 season every single year, there wasn't a ton of time for them to set up like really elaborate cinematography rigs, right? Like lighting rigs. Nor was there the computing power or software available to like pixel fuck every little lens flare and color time, etc., etc. And so oftentimes things were just shot on sticks, as they say. It was just a static shot. People would say stuff. You set up the shot over here. People would say stuff, and then they edit it. Very basic filmmaking 101 stuff. In modern Trek, that camera moves way too fucking much. Coupled with the overbearing musical score in the background, and I'm not even going to say the background, in the foreground, which oftentimes, combined with the cinematography, simply drowns out performances. Oftentimes, these performances are not being given the ability, the space, and the air to breathe to make them impactful. I'm sitting there trying to listen to these performances, and I've got this overbearing score, and I've got these lens flares hitting me, and it kind of just takes away from the drama of the moment. The one scene that really stands out to me that sort of encapsulates all these issues is when we're introduced to the half Klingon, half Jem'Hadar character, Lura Thok, right? She's like the first officer to Holly Hunter's Chancellor Ake. She shows up and she's, like I said, half Klingon, half Jem'Hadar. And they give her the most Disney-fied score accompanying her arrival to make her seem like she's a comedic character showing up. And then her character is played for laughs. And then the next time we see her character, she's played for laughs. And I'm sitting there thinking, if there's one alien race that should not be played primarily for laughs, it's Klingons. If there's another alien race that should not be primarily played for laughs, it's the Jem'Hadar. So why is it you're using a half Klingon, half Jem'Hadar strictly for laughs in this show? It kind of doesn't make any sense, but that in itself is sort of like what I'm talking about when it comes to the tone of modern Star Trek. They do that stuff far too often, and it just sucks me right out of the proceedings. So the bottom line is, I don't know if I could recommend this show or not. It kind of depends what kind of Star Trek you like. If you really enjoy the modern version of Star Trek, then you will probably enjoy this as well. If you prefer like what it used to be and you can't stand modern Trek, you're not going to like this. I don't know whether or not I'm going to stick with it because there are some aspects of modern Trek that I do really appreciate. There are things about this show that I really do appreciate. There are some structural production issues that I simply find difficult to get through, and that's maybe just on me. I don't know. Bottom line is Star Trek. Even bad Star Trek is still pretty decent, except Section 31. Holy shit. I got through like 10 minutes of that and I was like, I don't know what this is, but it ain't for me. I also do have to recognize that this is simply the first 2 episodes, and oftentimes, more often than not, shows with their first episode, a couple episodes down the line, they start to understand and get on the same page, and the writers and the producers and the actors really find the show's voice. So understanding that this is probably as bad as it's gonna be, maybe that gives me some hope to keep watching. Also, I'm not huge on supporting Paramount Plus because of the whole Ellison thing. See CBS News for an example. So yeah, that's my take on Starfleet Academy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I imagine you've got a lot of thoughts about it. We'll see you around.